Welcome to the Multifaceted Executive, the podcast where leadership meets diversity, innovation, and impact. We go beyond boardrooms and titles to bring you powerful stories and insights from executives of all backgrounds. Get ready to challenge conventional thinking, gain perspectives, and discover the leadership lessons you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started. Welcome to the Multifaceted Executive Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Cosme-Reddie, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Multifaceted Executive and Take Brand Consulting. I also proudly serve as the EVP of Operations for Alpha Phoenix. And for those of you who are not familiar with Alpha, it stands for the Association of Latino Professionals for America. I'm keeping this episode short and sweet because I want you to come back for more. This is going to be the start to an incredible journey together, so we will have plenty of time to learn more about each other. But really, this is about creating space for us to invite everyone to listen and executives from different cultures and backgrounds to have a platform that they can share their ideas to inspire action. And so you might be wondering, Amanda, what is a multifaceted executive? Well, a multifaceted executive is a leader that has many facets to them. They're not defined by a single industry, background, or even leadership style, but rather their ability to adapt, inspire, and create impact across different spaces. And what sets them apart is their ability to blend strategic decision-making with emotional intelligence and visionary thinking with purposeful execution, as well as business success and social responsibility. They embrace diverse perspectives and they challenge conventional leadership norms and create inclusive environments where teams and communities can thrive. The current perception outside of professional attire and executive presence, most people, when they hear executive, they're usually visualizing a white male. And come on, that's because it's based on decades of media, corporate culture, and systematic bias. And I know even in my personal journey, as I was working in different leadership roles within telecommunications, real estate, and technology, that was all I saw in the C-suite, white males. But there's a shift in perception that's happening with what I call the multifaceted executive. For example, as a servant leader and a public speaker, transforming multi-million-dollar brands and building strategic partnerships, I have many facets, and that's how I've been known as the multifaceted executive. Anybody who's worked with me on a project or even collaborated with me on a partnership can tell you that I bring a level of intentionality in my servant leadership. And I don't promise to have all the answers. That's why I call on other experts to join me, because there are more multifaceted executives out there, and I want you to meet them. So in this podcast, I'm going to feature executives from a variety of cultures and backgrounds to share their stories and insights across Fortune companies, nonprofits, and entrepreneurships. And with that being said, our first episode is called Don't Prove Your Value, Demonstrate It. That's because something like this has really been relevant to me throughout my personal and professional life. This has really helped me in terms of the way I think, the decisions that I make, and the people that I have around me. And so I'm going to share how you can become a multifaceted executive through strategic branding. For several years, I used to think that hard work was the answer to achieving my goals. But let's just be real here. Hard work is expected when you have a desire to be successful. Working hard got me promotions, but it didn't necessarily help me get into rooms with executives. In fact, The lack of access to executives early on in my career was a barrier. However, like anything, I didn't let that stop me. When my managers closed doors, I took the back entrance and I consistently put myself out there. There was something, though, that was still missing. And I would say after a deep period of reflection, it became clear to me. I needed to stop trying to prove my value and focus on demonstrating it. And I'm sure you can relate to this, whether you realize it or not. It goes as far back as our childhood, when we were trying to prove something to our parents, our teachers, our friends. And so if you find yourself in situations like over-explaining something or over-promising and under-delivering, or even burning yourself out, you've likely been trying to prove your value. I want you to stop this immediately and instead showcase your expertise and results through your work and accomplishments and track all of that. Be consistent in your commitments and follow through. That way you're able to really build trust and respect with different stakeholders. And most importantly, start building your brand. You'll do that by identifying your purpose and aligning that purpose with your core values. Then understanding what your value proposition is. Whether you're negotiating a salary or driving growth for a business, we are in a constant state of being able to demonstrate our value through our brand. I'll give you 2 examples based on some research I found. From an economic empowerment factor, executives with a strong personal brand can command salaries of up to 25% higher than peers without one. My personal opinion, more than 25%. As a business driver, and this is something that is crucial because I've actually spoken to a lot of leaders where they believe or really are in a situation that they don't feel like they're driving revenue for the business because maybe their department doesn't necessarily deal with the revenue aspect. But in reality, all of us can be business drivers for an organization. 50% of companies with visibly branded executives report stronger stakeholder engagement and long-term business partnerships. That is why it was so important for me to start Take Brand Consulting 3 years ago, because I saw a need to support women and underrepresented leaders with building their brand. For example, did you know that there's only 4 to 5% of Latinos in the C-suite at Fortune companies? And with Latinas, it's only 1 to 2%. So, no wonder why we've felt the need to prove ourselves to get to the top. This is also why it was just as important for me to create the Multifaceted Executive. It really, for me, started with a vision of being the most diverse and accessible publishing platform and has since evolved into a podcast. I want to actually take a moment to give a special shout out to my friend Erica Castro because I had an inspiring conversation with her about wanting to start a podcast, but I was already balancing entrepreneurship, volunteering, and of course, making time for my family. And so sometimes we need that person in our lives or, a situation that we're going through to really push us in the right direction and clear out the blockage or barriers that prevent us from moving forward. You'll see Erica later on. She's actually going to be one of my guests. And oh my gosh, y'all are going to learn so much from her. But long story short, she shared an idea with me that inspired me to take action. And that's what I want for all of us. Instead of having a standard interview over Zoom or a call and publishing each leader's article on the platform, I've decided that I'm interviewing these executives through the podcast and then publishing an article about them on the platform afterward. this gives my guest speakers a chance to build their brand through media and publishing engagements, but also myself a chance to manage my time effectively while doing something that really fuels my purpose as a servant leader. Now, my favorite part is that the title from every episode is inspired by a quote from our guest speaker. Some of you caught on to that with the first episode. In many of my public speaking engagements, I've shared this advice around not proving your value, but rather demonstrating it. And most of my followers want to lead with influence, but they don't know how to get started. They don't know how to really demonstrate their value and become that influential leader that they want to be. And so that's where I come in to help them build multi-million-dollar brands and strategic partnerships, because it gives them a competitive advantage, whether they're trying to do it themselves or representing the organizations that they work with. For example, usually employee resource groups, ERGs, like to get together and do, different workshops and things like that. And so I've done personal branding workshops for ERG leaders in, Fortune companies, for entrepreneurs that are starting up. And so that's a great way to really help blend your personal and professional brand. And so as they start to build this personal and professional brand, they start to notice that the right people are recognizing their impact. And it doesn't matter if these people are trying to hold them back or are envious of them, they will still end up meeting the right people because their brand is attracting the right people to them. They also own their narrative, and that gives them control over how they're perceived rather than leaving it up to others. Now, there's power in all of this, and your power means something. I'm not talking about your fancy title or your intelligence. I'm talking about your influence. At the end of the day, your title, your intelligence, and even your financial stature do not prove your value, but your influence does. I remember earlier on in the stages of my career, I was driven by money. I even skipped college right out of high school so I could start working at T-Mobile, and that commission was great, but I will say that it slowed me down. The idea of focusing on money only really slowed me down from what I wanted to do, which was get into leadership. And I started to convince myself that the title was the problem. And so let's fast forward a little bit. It wasn't until I went to college, which it was supposed to be a gap year, but it turned out to be like a gap decade. And when I went to college 9 years later, I realized that the money was temporary, but the cost of my education was priceless, because I feel like the money came and went, but my educational journey really helped me identify my purpose in life, which is being a servant leader. And so I finally let go of the idea that money is power. However, I still believed that the title was what I needed to be a successful leader, and that I would need to prove my value to get there. Being a servant leader has left such a positive influence on myself and the people I serve, and in the most meaningful ways. Regardless of that title, that finance and, intelligence aspect. So I want to remind you that your power is the influence you have on the communities that you serve, and that is invaluable. You don't have to prove your value when you are bringing that level of influence. And also, how you get to where you are is part of your story, but how you make an impact in your role as an executive is a privilege. Majority of the leaders that make it to the C-suite are typically either there because that has been their career path, or they were referred, whether it be organically or through nepotism, because let's be real, nepotism is out there still. And so who you bring along and how you lead and where you give back are all so important to you becoming this influential leader. You have the power to speak your mind while attracting followers. However, the influence that you have on others decides how many followers you'll have. I'm not just talking about social media followers. It's also about the people that follow you in life, okay? I'll break this down for you. From a social media aspect, anyone can post something viral, but the same content they share may not go viral if you were the one posting it. They have left an influence on a certain number of people, and that is why those people have began to engage in their content and follow them. Even if we look at this from a personal standpoint, some of my family and friends follow me regularly for advice, for a laugh, for a cry sometimes, and it's really because of that influence that I have on them. And so I want you to remember, you are the evidence, and I want to challenge you this month. Instead of trying to prove yourself, show up as the proof. If you do that, you'll be on your way to becoming a multifaceted executive. And who knows, you may just end up being a guest on the podcast with me. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and our YouTube channel so that way you don't miss out on any of the episodes ahead. We have a fantastic lineup of executives across Fortune companies, nonprofits, and entrepreneurships, and they're ready to share their ideas that inspire action in all of us. So like I said, I promised I'd keep it short and sweet. Thanks for listening to the Multifaceted Executive, where each episode reminds us that leadership looks different from every seat at the table. Cheers.